President and gentlemen of the Board of Directors and citizens, 1/3 of the population of the South is of the Negro race. No enterprise seeking the material, civil, or moral welfare of this section can disregard this element of our population and reach the highest success. I will convey to you, Mr. President and Directors, the sentiment of the masses of my race when I say that in no way have the value and manhood of the American Negro been more fittingly and generously recognized than by the managers of this magnificent expedition at every stage of its progress. It is a recognition that will do more to cement the friendship of the two races than any occurrence since the dawn of our freedom. Not only this, but the opportunity here afforded will awaken among us a new era of industrial progress. Ignorant and inexperienced, it is not strange that in the first years of our new life, we began at the top instead of the bottom, that a seat in Congress or the state legislature was more sought than real estate or industrial skill, that the political convention or stump speaking had more attraction than starting a dairy farm or a truck garden. A ship lost at sea for many days suddenly sighted a friendly vessel. From the mast of the unfortunate vessel was seen a signal: "Water, water, we die of thirst." The answer from the friendly vessel at once came back: "Cast down your bucket where you are." A second time, the signal, "Water, send us water," ran up from the distressed vessel and was answered, "Cast down your bucket where you are." A third and fourth signal for water was answered: "Cast down your bucket where you are." The captain of the distressed vessel at last, heeding the injunction, cast down his bucket, and it came up full of fresh, sparkling water from the mouth of the Amazon River.
Yeah, we are back here on WLTH 1370M. That is 92.7 in the FM dial. If you're nasty, we are back here on Straight Out of the Cannon with me, Scott Cannon, in the dark here as usual. You know what I'm saying? We like to get it popping. And that voice you just heard was very hard to hear because of the quality of the audio, but that was the voice of Booker T. Washington. Yes, Booker T. Washington. Who would have celebrated a birthday this week. One of the greatest figures of the early 20th century. One of the most influential African-American leaders ever. Definitely. This man shaped debates about race, about education, about economic progress in the United States. The reason I really wanted to do this segment was because in recent years, Booker T. Washington's legacy has taken a real beating from a lot of people, especially people who call themselves pro-black, because the perception is that he was very conciliatory towards white people and sort of was willing to, I don't want to say shrink himself, but to shrink himself in black people in order to fit what people call a white agenda. And I just want people to sort of reconsider that. I really want people to look at the life of this great man. And again, put it into context. This man was living in he was living in the 19th century and the early 20th century. He was born into slavery to Jane, an enslaved African-American woman, on the plantation of James Burroughs in southwest Virginia near Halesford in Franklin County. He never knew what day, month, or year he was even born. Just another one of those realities about the slavery back in those days. But evidence after his birth emerged and said that he was probably born on April the 5th, 1856. This would be his 170th birthday. He would have celebrated his 170th birthday this year. His father, said to be a white man who resided on a neighboring plantation. That man played no financial or emotional role in Washington's life. That was, again, another one of those very ugly realities about slavery. You know, people are outraged about Jeffrey Epstein. Well, slave owners were the original Jeffrey Epstein. People like Christopher Columbus and others. slavery wasn't just about physical labor, it was also about sex and the ability to access black bodies at will. And so whether or not Booker T. Washington's father impregnated his mother consensually or unconsensually is not really not something we particularly know. From his earliest years, Washington was known simply as Booker. Again, these people were property. They had no last names. This is the world he grew up in, where he was just Booker. When he was 9, Booker and his family in Virginia gained freedom under the Emancipation Proclamation as U.S. troops occupied their region. After emancipation, his mom took their family to the free state of West Virginia to join her husband, Washington Ferguson, who had escaped from slavery during the war and settled there. At this time, Booker was illiterate. He was illiterate. He was almost 10 years old and taught himself how to read. Painstakingly, I might add, and attended school for the first time. This man was so determined to get an education. At the age of 16, now remember, he just learned how to read at age 9 or 10. At 16, he made his way on foot. He walked to Hampton Institute, a school established in Virginia to educate freedmen and their descendants, where he also worked as a janitor to pay for his studies. This man arrived to campus with virtually no money, and his entrance exam was to clean the room. Upon graduating from Hampton University at age 19, he briefly returned home to West Virginia, but would later attend the Wayland Seminary in Washington, D.C. in 1878. In 1881, Hampton Institute President Samuel C. Armstrong recommended Washington, who at that point was only 25 years old, only 25, to become the first leader of Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute. Later it'd be called Tuskegee Institute, and now Tuskegee University, the new Teachers College, which is really what they call normal. It's really called normal colleges, but they're really for teachers, in Alabama. The new school opened on Independence Day, 1881. How poetic. Initially using a room donated by Butler Chapel AME Zion Church. At this point, he would build one of the most important black educational institutions in the country. He emphasized industrial and practical skills like agriculture, carpentry, and teaching. He thought that these skills would help black Americans, achieve economic independence and gradually gain respect in a segregated society. And so this is where you start to get a lot of what modern black people, a lot of the blackity black people, as I like to call them, a lot of their criticisms of Booker T. Washington start here, where his belief was we needed to focus on bettering ourselves and improving ourselves, not worry about white people, because really not a whole lot you can do about white people, but worry about, learning skills, learning trades, developing yourself, being educated, doing something productive and positive, instead of just saying, hey, I'm going to fight the white man. Again, this is 19th century America. This is 1881, folks. What do you want the man to do in 1881? The next year, Washington purchased a former plantation to be developed as the permanent site of the campus. Under his direction, the students literally built their own school, making bricks, constructing classrooms, barns, and outbuildings, growing their own crops, and raising livestock, both for learning and to provide for the most basic of necessities. Both men and women had to learn trades as well as academics. So once again, Booker T. Washington ahead of his time in believing that women were capable of learning trades as well. He was not somebody who excluded women from learning how to be carpenters or teach or, grow food or whatever. He believed in empowering the entire black community. Here's where the real criticism comes. His approach to racial progress was most clearly expressed in his 1895 Atlanta Compromise speech. He argued that black Americans should focus on economic self-improvement rather than immediately challenging segregation and disenfranchisement. This stance made him widely respected amongst many white leaders and philanthropists, giving him significant political influence. However, his views were controversial. Critics like W.E.B. Du Bois argued that Washington was too accommodating to racism and black Americans should demand full civil rights immediately. Du Bois insisted on full civil rights, due process of the law, increased political representation for African Americans, which he believed could only be achieved through activism and higher education through African Americans. He believed in the talented 10th. And so Du Bois, would label Washington the great accommodator. Washington responded that confrontation could lead to disaster for the outnumbered black people and that cooperation with supportive whites was the only way to overcome racism in the long run. But in saying that, Washington would actually contribute secretly and substantially to mounting legal challenges and activist African Americans that activists had launched against segregation and disenfranchisement of black people. So Booker T. Washington wasn't just some Uncle Tom saying, hey, don't challenge the white man. He was saying, look, man, these people are psychos. These people are psychotic. These people were literally living with the white equivalent of ISIS or Al Qaeda or, Nazis or something in the 19th century. What you're seeing, Israel doing Gaza right now. These people used to regularly burn whole black neighborhoods to the ground and lynch and skin everybody alive. They would literally cut babies out of black women's stomachs. The horrors of the black codes, Jim Crow, segregation South, have only begun to be fully examined in the time that we live in. And I can only imagine how horrific the horrors that people like Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois had to live through. And that's why I've never been critical of them. I know some people like to be critical of Booker T. Washington. Some people are critical of W.B. Du Bois. I say, look, these people were in the 19th century, bro. They were living under a literal terrorist state where pogroms were regularly visited on black people. I am not going to criticize anybody who is making an effort to just make it stop. And that's fundamentally what they were trying to do. Whole black neighborhoods used to get wiped out regularly. Everybody dead. Hundreds of people dead. In the early 20th century, when heavyweight champion Jack Johnson, who was the first black heavyweight champion, whenever he'd win a fight, white people go to the nearest black community and burn it to the ground and kill as many people as they could just to let black people know that just because one of us had done something, that didn't mean that we weren't still niggers in America. That is the terrorism that Booker T. Washington, that W.E.B. Du Bois were looking at. So I don't judge either one of them. I think both of them had a point. I definitely think Booker T. Washington has taken a lot of heat and responsibility. People love to talk about respectability politics and love to criticize him for saying that black people should be respectable. You should be respectable. Yes, white people should not be racist. That is true. You should also be respectable. You also should actually have some, act like you got some doggone sense as well. And have something going for yourself. That's a fact. And so as sort of cultural liberalism has sort of made its way through our community, there's this perception that because discrimination exists, that you don't have to improve yourself in any way. And that's just complete nonsense. I'm sorry. Booker T. Washington built institutions all over the country and educated thousands of Black Americans. He secured funding. He secured funding from people like the Rockefellers for Black institutions. He secured political support from, politicians. He was a national spokesperson for Black people during a time of not just racial discrimination, but racial terrorism. His emphasis on self-help and economic empowerment influenced people like Marcus Garvey. His focus on education helped inspire future institutions and leaders, even those who didn't necessarily agree with him. And so ultimately, I think it's important. It's important for us to never allow ourselves to forget the importance of figures like Booker T. Washington. Again, it's very easy to be in 2026 and be judgmental. Oh, he just trying to make white people like him. He a Uncle Tom. He a coon. He trying to make white. Bro, he was literally living in the greatest terror state on the planet at that point. Being Black in America was like being a chicken in a KFC. Okay? They literally used to barbecue us and eat us. That is the era that Booker T. Washington was living in. Very easy to be a militant, very easily to be a radical. It's very, very easy to be a revolutionary. In 2026, on a laptop computer, on a iPhone, we have not experienced the level of terrorism that people like Booker T. Washington. Hell, even people like Martin Luther King and them probably didn't experience the same level of terrorism that people like Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois and those people, like Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois would have looked at Martin Luther King and people like Jesse Jackson and been like, man, y'all got it easy. They literally used to eat us alive in 1905. They was literally eating us. They'll just lynch a few of y'all or kill a few of y'all. They used to burn our whole neighborhoods to the ground. And then, lynch us, and they would have parties where they would lynch us and string us up on a tree, and everybody would gather around, women, children, men, everybody. That is the world that he came up in. That is the world he lived in. And yes, was he trying to make some accommodations? He was trying to make it stop. He was trying to make it stop. The pain, the agony, the death, the destruction, all he wanted to do is make it stop. And I'm in no position in 2016 to judge somebody like Booker T. Washington. Good God, man. I mean, he's been dead for a long time, but my heart goes out to him. And everybody, all my ancestors from the South, and I can only imagine some of the horrors they lived through. I've told the story about my great-grandfather who was chased out of Mississippi by the Ku Klux Klan. They lynched his friend, and he never saw him again. This is real, folks. That was real. That was real. Whew. Glad to get that off my chest.